Gretsch has a certain niche, I think, in jazz history, and rather than the other books that concern themselves with finishes and all that kind of stuff, I'm trying to do this book about the people who made them and played them, because I think that's what really made Gretsch that particular niche, and it mostly centers around, obviously, the jazz artists of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Some before that as well, but that was really their heyday. It was in the 50s. Obviously, your name kept cropping up many times in the interviews I've done so far. I've had it with, just to give you kind of the scope of the book, I've had interviews with Louis Bellson, Phil Grant, Don Lemon, and just this last weekend I had one with Charlie Persip in New York. I want to include you in this book, and I think you'll have a lot of good input here. First thing I want to ask you is if you were involved in any of the Gretsch drum nights in Birdland.
You're asking me if I was involved?
Right.
I don't think so, no.
You didn't play? Okay,
no.
Okay. Some of the guys played those engagements, and they had a particular story.
No, in fact, I don't think, now that I think about it, I don't know if I might have played at Birdland once, but I think I played mostly at Basin Street West, which was about 2 blocks from there.
Right.
But Basin Street, I don't know if they call it Basin Street West, but Basin Street.
Right. Okay. The way I've kind of constructed this interview is have the endorsers of Gretsch Drums, or were the endorsers of Gretsch Drums, talk about other endorsers of Gretsch Drums. So if I can, I just want to start at the top of this list and read off a name to you. If something comes to mind, that's fine. If it doesn't...
About each drummer, huh?
Yeah, if it doesn't, that's fine too. About their style. This way I find out not only a lot about that particular drummer and his style, but also about the person that I'm interviewing, because what was important to them obviously tells a lot about that person. The first name I have on the list here is Billy Gladstone.
Gee, I don't know anything about him.
Okay. Chick Webb.
Well, all I know about Chick Webb was really that he had his band, and that Ella Fitzgerald sang with him, and but other than that, that was it.
Okay, that's fine. Like I said, some of these guys you're going to have a lot to talk about. Some you'll just be a passing thing. Joe Jones.
Papa Joe Jones.
Yes.
Well, the one thing that comes to mind was when I was on Woody's band in 1954. We were at Basin Street, and we had just played a set, and we played a set. We were having our intermission. We were out. All the guys were just kind of hanging out near the front of the entryway there, and Joe Jones was there, and he was saying something to the effect of, just to not to do so much, not to try to play everything in one song. He just play some time, and because apparently I was like 19 and young and energetic and all that, so I was trying to play everything in one song. So he made a point of saying that, just be cool. You got plenty of time to do all your licks, and I thought that was important. Taste the whole bit.
He's a pretty opinionated character.
Yeah, but truly one of the great innovators, and because he was one of the first guys to use the hi-hat and really create a lot of the basic things that still apply in big band drumming. And that was the one thing that I remember about Joe Jones. Because that was the only time I met him.
Right. How about a guy by the name of O'Neill Spencer? He might have been before your time.
No, I don't know him.
Nick Fatul.
Well, I know that there again, it just from what I would see, I just saw pictures of him and heard some things, and I think I saw a little one of those music shorts that they had years ago, and he was like a real simple player, but just a great timekeeper. Most of those early drummers were great timekeepers, because that's what they did best, And his solos were very simple, but they worked, and they were appropriate for the time.
How about Davy Tuff?
Well, Davy Tuff was really my first influence. I used to visit my grandmother, and my aunt had a record collection of Woody Herman. I guess they were because of my father, but she loved jazz too. But they had some records of the 1946 Woody Herman band. So they had some of the recordings of Caledonia and Apple Honey and all those things, and I remember how exciting it was for me to hear those records, and I remember the first time I heard Davy Tuff with the ending, the way he would hit the bass drum, boom, 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 boom. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was first time I heard that. Boy, all the hair in the back of my neck and it just went up, because to me that was so innovative and so great. You know, God, how did he think of that? It was just so perfect, you know. And then I heard later, a couple of years ago, we had a couple of falls ago, we had a thing for Woody Herman. It was called Early Autumn here in Newport, here in California. And I got to meet Don Lemon and talk to him, you know, which was a great thrill. And he mentioned the fact that when he came on the band, Woody had asked him to try and do that with a bass drum, you know, because you always hear stories of guys your own age where when they join a band and they say, "Well, try to play this like so and so," and you know, but you never think of guys like Don Lemon and how great he was, that he was also told to do the same thing, do the endings like Davy Tuff. And you think they would have to go through that same kind of you know, things in their career, but they did.
That kind of homage, huh? That
yeah, yeah. It was. Then I heard stories about Davy, just things where he was, you know, that when he was on the band, that they had a second drummer because apparently he had some problems. I don't know, health problems or something like that. So Stan Levy was a drummer that also traveled with the band. And whenever Davy couldn't do it, Stan would play, you know. And,
yeah, it was a great loss.
I never met him, but I guess he was out in California for a while, and a couple of my friends that I worked with got to play with him.
How about a fellow by the name of Alberto Calderon? He played with Cougar.
No, I didn't.
No? Okay. Shelley Man?
Well, of course, Shelley was my teacher for about almost 2 years. And Shelley was a great influence to me, of course, and almost a father figure, and he was instrumental in getting me on Woody Herman's band. And I really loved him a lot. I really loved him. I remember one particular story where we lived on First Street in Santa Ana, and in order to go to San Diego, everybody had this is before the freeways. That was one of the ways to drive through First Street, right, through town there, and we lived there, and I heard that he was going to be doing a concert. So for some reason, I just felt that he would be driving by our house. So I remember I made a big sign, and I wrote "Shelley Man, stop," or I forget what I wrote down. And sure enough, I saw him drive by, and they turned around, and they acknowledged my, you know, being there, but of course they didn't stop. But it was. Then I found out later something that was really touching to me. I found out later that he didn't really like to teach, but I guess he liked me so much that he made an exception to me, and he, you know, he would come to the old Drum City here in Hollywood and give me lessons, you know, every 2 weeks, and it was quite a thrill for me, because of course I had heard of him before I started to study with him. In fact, one of my best friends used to drive me to Hermosa Beach when Shelley was playing at the Lighthouse with Howard Rumsey, and that's when I met him. And then my friend
was with who? I'm sorry, Howard.
Howard Rumsey.
RUMSCY?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a band leader and part owner, I believe, at the old Lighthouse in Hermosa Beach, and Shelley was there with Shorty Rogers and Jimmy Jufrey, and I think Frank Patchen was playing piano, Howard was playing bass, and that's when I first met Shelly, and then I guess Shelly took a liking to me, and my friend Dick Hine encouraged me to ask Shelly if I could study with him. So that's how that all came about. And then about a year later, 2 years later, a year and a half later, he called me and he said that Woody was looking for a drummer and to drive to Oceanside at a certain high school there and audition for the band. So my dad drove me down, and it was in a gym. And so Woody asked me to sit in, and of course I was scared to death. And we played two tunes, and one was The Goof and I, which I knew. I'd heard of this. I heard this song, and I knew it pretty well. So that one I felt I did pretty good on El Padillo, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
What song was that? Do you recall?
The other song, I don't remember what it was. I could read and everything, but I just wasn't familiar. And then he just grabbed his coat. He didn't say goodbye, didn't acknowledge me, didn't say one thing or the other. He just grabbed his coat and left. And the band stayed there and kept playing. And I said, oh, well, he doesn't like me. So then a couple of weeks later, I got a call from Abe Turchin, who was the manager at that time, and he says...
manager of
the Woody Herman band.
Of Woody Herman's band? Okay.
Yeah.
How do you spell his last name? C-H-U-R...
Turchin.
Turchin.
Yeah, T-U-R-C-H-E-N, I guess. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Or maybe I-N.
Uh-huh.
And, get your shots and get your passport. You're going to be coming to Europe with the band. And I said, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And I found out later that was just what Woody would do all the time. He would always leave the bandstand early, and like the last set. So it had nothing to do with me. It's just that's when it was time for him to leave. And I took it as if a sign that he didn't really care about me. Didn't really like me one way or the other. So I joined the band about 3 or 4 months later. And stayed with the band for 2 years. I left the band for a short time, about halfway through, and I was really just kind of depressed. It was just, there's so much more to being on the road than just playing, as you would know.
Sure.
And it was pretty tough for me. I was only 19, and guys were telling me how to play, and I didn't even know what I was supposed to sound like myself, really, other than just records that I had heard. And Woody would call me, and some of the guys would call me, and they'd say, Chuck, come on back. And so finally, Woody called me, and he says, look, we really want you to come back. He says, well, I'll do a record, and it will feature you, and it'll be good for you if you come back. And I that really didn't really make any didn't really move me at all. But I was over at my friend this guy Dick Hine again, who initially had introduced me to Shelly Manne, and he says, yeah, you ought to go back. He says it'd be good for you, and it's really good experience, and it's good for your name and the whole bit. So I called Woody I think it was about 2 days before they left town to go on this tour, and he had a drummer all set up, and I called Woody. He says sure, and so which was I was very fortunate that he would do that, because he had to cancel the other guy at the last minute. So I went back on the band, and we did the record. And that record turned out to be an EP when EPs first came out, the little 45 extended plays. And one side was Buddy Rich, and then Buddy did drums and hi-fi, and I did that was the name of the tune that he did, and I did Skinned and Skinned Again.
S-K-I-N-E-D?
Yeah.
Skinned and Skinned Again.
Yeah, and I think it was written by Billy, what's the name of that guy, the famous arranger? Billy, he had the used to write for saxes, kind of a slurry style. Billy May. I think Billy May, I might be wrong. Might have been somebody else. Anyway, we did those things. And it did quite well. And then later they made a whole album, and I think they used Dave Black, and I'm not sure who the other drummers were. But God, Buddy's thing sounded great. I thought my thing was nothing but somebody told me, a guy here at Capitol, that the record sold well because a lot of dancers used it for performances and stuff, like professional dancers.
Now, what was the relation with Buddy Rich on that record? Why was he on one side and you? He wasn't obviously playing with Herman.
Yeah, he was.
He was playing with Herman.
That was the tie.
Ah.
See, he recorded his thing with Woody's band. They recorded it here in Hollywood. We did a thing, I think called Squared Circle, I believe. I think that was Billy May had written that arrangement, or no, it was he wrote that kind of a swing version of Mexican hat dance, what they call it, Mexican hat trick.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a Billy May thing, I think. I hope I'm getting this correct. We recorded that, and then the thing called Squared Circle. I'm not sure whose arrangement that was. That might also have been his. And then Buddy came in and did his thing, and just tore it up.
Yeah.
It sounded so great.
Yeah. What was the name of the album that was recorded later? Do you remember? Do you recall what the name of the album?
I think it was released. I think it was like 3 or 4 named bands. I'm not sure the name, how they called, what the title was, but I remember seeing a picture of Harry James, Les Brown, and Woody, and I forget who the other guy was. And so they each had 3 cuts or whatever like that, whatever that was.
I didn't know Rich ever played with her.
Yeah, I think he did. He did some other things too. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's playing on Your Father's Mustache. He did some things with the band, but and then he did this thing too. And I don't know how it came about. I would imagine that maybe Woody asked Buddy if he'd do it. Through some connection, because Woody was with Capitol. The first thing I did with Woody was on Columbia Records, but I guess he also had some ties with Capitol from the old days, and so they did. I think that was originally on Capitol Records.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. A fellow by the name of Dick Shanahan played with Charlie Barnett.
I met Dick, and I know he's a fine drummer, but other than that, I'm not sure. I'm not really too familiar with his style or what his thing was.
Do you know if he's still alive?
I believe he is. Yes, in fact, I know he is. He still works. Oh God, who does he play with? I can't think of who he's working with.
Do you know where he's living?
I think in the valley here, as far as I know, San Fernando Valley.
Okay, I'll have to get a union directory.
Yeah.
Because some of these guys, I haven't been able to track down.
I think he's in the valley.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate that. How about George Wetling? Any experience with him?
No, I didn't know him.
Kenny Clark? Clue?
Kenny Clark, I never met him, but I was so familiar with his style, and he was just a wonderful drummer, a first real bebop drummer, and just had a unique style, real crisp and tight, and I really enjoyed his style. In a lot of ways, he was really kind of ahead of his time, because he influenced a lot of guys that came after him, as far as that driving forward feel, that he had. It was so nice.
Now you say it's crisp and sharp, and yet Don Lemon said he could never play his drums because they were so loose. They were tuned so loose.
That's interesting.
And then Charlie Persip said, yeah, but he had the chops to be able to play on a loose, be able.
Yeah, because he would play real tight style, and it was different than anyone else.
Usually, someone who plays a loose set has kind of a laid-back feel.
A laid-back feel.
Yeah.
You're right.
Isn't that interesting?
I didn't know that, and even on the records that I'm thinking of, he always. Maybe his toms were loose. Well, you know what? He didn't use his toms very much. A lot of his fills were always on a snare, and his groove on the cymbals were on his ride was real tight.
Yeah.
Feel.
How about Shadow Wilson?
The only thing I remember about Shadow Wilson was the thing that he did with Basie's band, Queer. I think it was called Queer Street.
Right.
And he did that fill there that was just really super great. And in fact, I still use that fill. I was so impressed with it. And I like most of us, I steal from wherever I like. I just steal.
Oh, sure.
But anyway, but that was the one thing that I know about him, and the fact that he didn't do more recording in the jazz circles because of the fact that he was so busy in the studios. I understand. But I also heard him do a thing. Well, this is a funny story. I also heard him do a thing with I think it was with Jerry Mulligan, and I never will forget. I had this one particular record that it was a monk thing, and rhythm thing. I forget the name of the title of the monk thing. In fact, I wish I could find the lead sheet because I really liked that record. And Shadow's on it, and he plays a solo on that, a little bridge, 8 bars or whatever. And I remember I'd listen to that thing over and over, and I'd try to copy it, and I tried. Finally, after days and days and hours of listening, I finally thought I had it, and I wrote it down, and I started to play it, and I was using it. Then years later, I pulled that record out again and played it, and I still had the copy of my transcription of it, totally wrong. But I was playing it correctly, but I didn't write it down correctly. But he was very, very inventive drummer, you know. I never got a chance to meet him though. Shadow.
How about Louis Bellson?
Louis I've met, and he's a wonderful drummer and a beautiful guy, and just every time I meet him he's so gracious and he's just a wonderful guy, and I really respect him. He's just a great drummer. He had sort of he had that traditional big band swing feel, similar, not quite as driving as Buddy, but he had a similar feel, but he was so much more loose about his playing. You know, I remember the thing he did, what was it called? He did with Duke Ellington. I was really impressed with it. He wrote at least this one period. He wrote a couple of charts, and he recorded them with Duke Ellington, and I forget the name of the tunes now, but they're really nice. He writes just so good too. You know? Other than that, I never got any closer to him than just to say hello and maybe talk a little bit. But
right. How about Denzel Best?
Well, I'm only familiar with him in most of these guys that you're mentioning are guys from back east, so I never had a chance to meet him.
Right.
But just he's tremendous brushwork, you know. Other than that, I never met him.
Don Lemon, you talked a little bit about meeting him.
Yeah, Don Lemon I have great respect for, because Don Lemon, of course, he and Davey Tuff were the first couple of great drummers with Woody's band, and Don Lemon did so many great things with him. Four Brothers and Keen and Peachy, and he was so great. I just loved his time feel, and he's really a wonderful drummer.
How about Mel Lewis?
Mel was another guy. Mel followed in the footsteps of Tiny Khan, and made it, just a continuation of Tiny's playing, and then of course he came into his own. But fine drummer, really a great drummer.
How would you qualify that style, the Tiny Khan style? What sets that apart? Why did you identify
it was a Tiny, when he would play, at least the things that I've only heard limited recordings of Tiny, but the thing that I noticed about Tiny, and that Mel tried to continue with that style, was a kind of a snare and bass drum going back and forth, and then Max Roach did the same thing, but Tiny had a different thing about it, and I'm sure it was influenced with Mel. The guy that promoted Tiny more than anyone else that I'm aware of is a guy who played lead trumpet, Al Persino. And I know when I joined Woody's band, he would play some Tiny Khan things, and it was a certain looseness. I think Tiny was one of the first guys to break away from that real traditional 4/4 feel. He was like more of a modernist, and he was looser and very musical and dynamic. And he would sound as good with a small group. He recorded some things with Stan Getz and sounded just marvelous. Some fast tempos and just sound great on him. You know, really a light feel and perfect. And he turned around and played like big band style drumming. Just a wonderful drummer. You know, really the beginning of a new drum era. When I think that's what Tiny created.
How about Art Blakey?
Art Blakey at one time was a great influence with me also. He was more of a stiff style, but the thing that I liked about Art Blakey was all these guys that I liked were stylists, and Art Blakey used to use his hi-hat whenever he would play figures with a band, which I thought was interesting. He would just kind of splash his hi-hat and really use it in a musical way to emphasize, you know, little parts of an arrangement, and just marvelous style that he would do, you know. And of course, he'd have that tremendous roll that he used to do all the time. He used to do a lot of tricks, but he was effective, his style, you know. But he was one of the first guys, the first main influences that I had of the black drummers, you know. In fact, he was the first guy. Prior to that, it was Davey and Tiny Khan and Shelley. But Art Blakey was the first of a series of black drummers that I like. After that, it was Philly Joe, then Alvin, and Tony Williams, and you know.
Yeah, we'll get to those.
Yeah.
I'm doing these on a chronological basis,
Okay.
and obviously I'm getting up to that. Roy Hart.
Roy Hart, you know, I'm not really familiar with him. I know he did some records. The things that I heard, to be honest with you, you know, were good. Not, you know, they didn't really impress me in any way. Were, you know.
I think they had him listed as an endorser primarily because he had the drum shop and probably moved a lot of Gretsch drums.
Yeah, he was a nice guy, and I was friends with him, and he, you know. But other than that, that was the extent of it.
Okay, Sam Milano.
I didn't know him.
Bill Richmond.
Bill I had met, but I don't really know too much about him either.
Okay, Jimmy Pratt.
No.
Charlie Smith. Elvin Jones.
Alvin, I got to meet him on several occasions, and just tremendous. I mean, this guy. Well, I tell us I teach over at Musicians Institute. I've been there for about 10 years now.
Where is that?
That's here in Hollywood.
Okay.
It's a rhythm section school. It started off as a guitar school, and they added bass, and they added percussion. Now they have vocal, and they have keyboard. And anyway, I always tell the story about my version of the history of jazz, and I go through all the early drummers, you know, Baby Dodds and Joe Jones and all that, and I count, and then I say, and then here comes Alvin Jones, and I say, Alvin Jones almost single-handedly changed the whole thing about drums, and I tell him the story about that I went into Shelly Mann's Manhole here in Hollywood. Shelly Mann had a nightclub here in Hollywood on Cahuenga Boulevard. It was called the Manhole. And I saw Alvin there with John Coltrane. I walked in. John is like, they're playing. John Coltrane's playing, the bass player's playing, and Alvin just kind of slumped over, and you know, with his head hanging over the snare drum, and he's got a cigarette in his hand. His arms are hanging down loosely, down, you know, at his sides, you know, and he's at the drums, and he's like he's going to play, but he's got his head down, and like and then all of a sudden he just snaps up and starts to play and pound and crash and do all these just like weird, to me, weird, you know, not totally not caring what he's doing, using the butt end of his stick and just smashing him. I'm saying, oh my God, what is he doing? I had never seen anyone like this before. And then after I had a couple of drinks, I said, yeah, that's now. Oh yeah, oh I see. You know, by the end of the night, I was totally a convert. I said everybody else was wrong and he's the only one that's right. But that was the impression he made on me. You know, he just totally turned me around.
Yeah, incredible player, isn't he?
God,
it's scary.
And he's still going. He's still going strong.
I know. We just saw he was up here at Kimball's. My son and I, 10-year-old son and I went over to see him, and my son was just so taken by him. And he's only 10 years old. He just couldn't believe the power and the dynamic.
And he still has an enthusiasm.
Oh yeah.
Too. And he's like and he's just a sweetheart of a guy.
I know. We went backstage, and I was trying to talk to him because I felt like I was a fellow drummer. He wasn't interested in me. He wanted to talk to my 10-year-old. He picked him up, and he's talking to him, and and I thought that was really neat.
What a beautiful guy he is.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. This guy.
In fact, excuse me for a second. I had a student, in class there at MI. And this guy just wouldn't respond to anything. And of course, I had told him my version of the history of jazz. And finally, one night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I get this phone call. And he says, Chuck? I said, yeah? He says, this is Todd. And at that time, my daughter was going with a guy named Todd, so I thought it was him. I forgot that there was also a Todd at MI. He says, this is Todd. And I said, well, this couldn't be my daughter's boyfriend. What's up, Todd? And he had obviously he had a couple of drinks, He says, I just saw Alvin Jones. I said, yeah? I said, what'd you think? He says, how do you play 3 against 2? So I knew that something had finally got to him, where because this guy was like real quiet. He would never smile, just no expression, nothing, And finally, something cut through, so that made me feel real good.
Took somebody like Alvin to do it, right?
Yeah, it had to be somebody like Alvin.
This guy was back east, and again, it was a drum shop owner, so maybe that's why he was listed as an endorser. But Jack Adams?
I don't know him.
Okay, Sam Woodyard.
I saw Sam with, he played with Duke's band, didn't he?
That's correct.
Yeah. Great, real driving, just technician and clean. Other than that, just what I heard on the record,
Okay. Max Roach.
Great influence on me. Great. So musical and colorful, loose. And then he had that great quintet with Harold Land and Bud Powell's brother on piano. I forget what his name was. Who was the guy that played trumpet with the band that died young? We called him Brownie. Brownie. Oh, God, I can't think of his name. Anyway, Max was just so musical and was just a wonderful soloist. I think the solos that impressed me with the way he was so musical with the solos. He was wonderful. I might have said hello to him, met him once, because I think he worked out at Lighthouse for a while. After Shelley left, I think he replaced Shelley for a couple years. I think I might have met him, but I never was. I didn't. He's not. To me, he wasn't friendly like Alvin was. So I think he might have we just might have met, but just didn't really get into it,
Philly Joe Jones.
Philly was my next influence after Max, and of course he did those great things with Miles, and God, he another kind of a force, just strong. I mean, so strong. And I found out later he used to play with blues and rhythm bands, and that's how he got so strong. And then I heard he was also with Buddy Rich's band for a short time. When Buddy was into dancing and fronting the band, he would take Buddy Rich's place, at the drums, and so he would he would play a lot of Buddy's things, but he would play them in his fashion, and just tremendous. God, he was so great. It's very powerful and commanding, just wonderful. I don't know. Each guy that I liked was so unique and so stylized, but he just was another great. I mean, another step forward in soloing and the dynamics and control and time and just tremendous drummer.
How about Jimmie Cobb?
Jimmie Cobb was just a nice groove player. Although I've heard him play some nice things, solos. He followed Philly, if I'm not mistaken, with Miles, at least for a time. And I know that I saw Miles here in town with that sextet Cannonball. And I went up to Miles and I said that I missed Philly, and he says, "Everybody misses Philly." Because Philly left such an impression with the band, so it was his band, you know. But Jimmie did a fine job, you know. He recorded some nice things.
Do you know if Jimmie's still around?
That I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
He probably is. I would think he is.
Was he from the West Coast?
No, I think he's back east.
Back east, yeah. Okay. How about Tony Williams?
That's the next guy that I like. Tony, which is God. I mean, the things he did with Miles, that Nefertiti album, just so great, just unreal. The way he would use his hi-hats, and he would do things like almost like Dixieland things on the snare drum, as far as making like rim shots but then make him more modern. I mean, he was so free in his ideas. You know, he wasn't a very nice person. I got to meet him a couple of times, and he just wasn't very nice to me. But I still hold him in high respect for his talent, but especially his time when he was with Miles. Later, the things he did later on, I didn't care for too much. But boy, that time when he was with Miles and that especially that Nefertiti album, that time, that was one of his best. Really tremendous. Mm-hmm. Don't let me forget to talk about Jim Rupp. Have you heard of him?
No.
Jim Rupp is I think he owns a drum shop someplace in the Midwest. And he's I hope I have the name correct. I'm pretty sure I do. He's on that Woody Herman album, the 50th anniversary. Now, to me, Jim Rupp epitomizes. I don't know how old Jim Rupp is. I don't know anything about him, but I think to me he epitomizes that true big band style, but yet another notch forward. I mean, he isn't like, he doesn't have a whole lot of technique. Even he has technique. Don't misunderstand me. But it's just tremendous player. If you have a chance to hear the record, he's just, the use of his flams and just his bombastic style is really super. I wish there was. It's too bad he didn't record more with the band, because he's right up there with, as far as I'm concerned, with Don Lemon. Mm-hmm. And then Shelley did some things, not really the blues, and a couple of things when Gene Ammons was on the band. More Moon, he did some those two tracks. Shelley sound, that's the best drumming that I ever heard Shelley play for big band. And then this kid is the other guy, Jim Rupp. I mean, no one knows about him, but he's just tremendous. I mean, all the drummers, to me, this is my own feeling, all the drummers that are big, try to play big band, they're playing big band, but they're small band drummers. They don't know how to play big band. They all play really on top of the beat, and it sounds like it sounds like a small band drummer playing with a big band. But this kid plays big band style. You know, I was talking to this guy that was playing that played trumpet on the band, and he's on that record. I forget his name right now. He's living down in Orange County right now. Redheaded guy, I can't think of his name right now. and he was saying that almost 2 days after he joined the band, after he joined Woody's band, that Woody almost fired him, but that after he just started to really get into it, and that album that he's on, 50th anniversary, he just sounds just great. God, he just, if you get a chance to listen to it, really, it's just tremendous album.
And it's interesting that you say that big band drummers try to play like small group drummers. And when I interviewed Charlie Persip, he said that's his quest. He said he agreed with that, but he said, I'm trying to put the small band influence into big band drumming.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Right. But I find that so interesting to,
that's what I'm trying to do too, in fact. I'm trying to do that too, but you still gotta, but to me, that time thing is so important.
Right.
That's why I respect, even though Don Lemon didn't have a whole lot of technique, man, he would play with the band. He wasn't on top of the band trying to pull the band up. He was in the band. He played the time with the band. And Shelley did that too on those couple of records. He did it with Stan to a certain extent, but Stan Kenton was he was playing a different style of music. But when he played those two sides, More Moon and Not Really the Blues, he was playing that big band swing style that was so good, Yeah, and Mel Lewis, I gotta say, Mel Lewis is in that group too, but not quite as strong as Don Lemon, Shelley, and this kid Jim Rupp. But all these other young guys that are playing with the guy from Canada, that Boss Brass, he sounds good, but it's not big band. It's not big band for my taste. I mean, these are the only guys of the modern drummers that, because I consider Don Lemon, even though Don Lemon was from that era, he was very modern in his drumming. He wasn't like Buddy or Louie. Those guys were 4/4 players, but Don Lemon was not a 4/4 player. He would use his bass drum sparingly and just drop bombs here and there, but just I can't explain it. But there's something about their time, the way they would play time.
How about a fellow who is both small and big band, Jake Hanna?
Jake, I've heard Jake play, and I heard him. In fact, I heard him with Woody's band, and he sounded marvelous with the bass. Again, I'm basing my thing on recordings, so record-wise, I didn't hear anything that he played with either a small or big band that impressed me. I mean, they're great, but I never heard anything where he matched the guys that I was just talking about. But definitely, and I tell you what, Jake is a wonderful guy. When I did these two things, I did that thing that I was talking a little while ago about the early autumn thing, for Woody, and then last year this thing they had here on the West Coast Jazz, they had a thing out here, all put on by KLON, and I did both of those things with the big bands, and they had called Jake first, and Jake told them to call me, and it was so wonderful that he did that, because I guess I don't know if he knew how meaningful how much it meant to me, but I just gotta take my hat off to him, because it really meant a lot to me that he did that.
Sure.
I heard Sonny Payne. This is a thing that I remember about Sonny Payne. Besides hearing how good he sounded with the band, I heard him one time at the Coconut Grove here in Hollywood, and he was playing. They were playing an intermission, and all the lights were off in the room, and they were just like had little lights at each table. They were having like dinner. It was like dinner. They were playing dinner music, but they were playing some nice bassy things. Naturally, I mean, it sounded great. I mean, even though they're playing softer, and he impressed me more at that time. When I heard him play that way, he could play another way than the way that we all know him by being really strong, and great chops and soloists. I mean, that was one side of it. But he also had this other side that was very musical and very tasty and really tremendous. I was really impressed when I heard him play that other side of his style with him. You know, nice guy too. You know.
Charlie Perry.
I didn't know him.
Okay. Sonny Payne played with Count Basie.
Yeah, another wonderful drummer. I heard Sonny Payne. This is a thing that I remember about Sonny Payne. Besides hearing how good he sounded with the band, I heard him one time at the Coconut Grove here in Hollywood, and he was playing. They were playing an intermission, and all the lights were off in the room, and they were just like had little lights at each table. They were having like dinner. It was like dinner. They were playing dinner music, but they were playing some nice bassy things. You know, naturally. I mean, it sounded great. I mean, even though they're playing softer, and he impressed me more at that time. When I heard him play that way, he could play another way than the way that we all know him by being really strong, you know, and great chops and soloists. I mean, that was one side of it. But he also had this other side that was very musical and very tasty and really tremendous. I was really impressed when I heard him play that other side of his style with him. You know, nice guy too.
How about Art Taylor?
I didn't know him.
Okay.
To me, I don't know Art, and I hope I don't mean to discredit him, but he seemed to me that he was kind of he tried to be a Philly Joe Jones clone.
Charlie Persett.
I wasn't too familiar with him.
Okay. These are more contemporary guys, but I wanted to include them in the book anyway. And if you have any thoughts, what about Phil Collins or Charlie Watts? They're rock and rollers, but you know, I thought I'd throw that in just for a little.
Watts is the guy that. What was it?
Charlie Watts plays.
Charlie Watts. Yeah, he's the one that plays with the Rolling
Stones, right?
The only thing I knew about him was that he had a big band. He had another drummer with him, and he loves Elvin Jones. So for that part of it, I respect him. But you know, I mean, I'm sure he knows where he is, and he knows he knows what he is. You know, and I give him credit for what he's done. But other than that, I mean, as far as leaving a mark in drumming, I don't think so.
How about guys within the Gretsch company? Phil Grant, he was kind of their artist endorsement person. Did you have any experience with him?
No.
Okay. Who was your contact with Gretsch?
I'm trying to think who it was. You know, when I was young in those days, you know, I didn't know much about anything, and I just didn't. That whole thing came to me via Woody Herman, you know, and
okay.
So it just like it was a quick thing, and you know, I was so, I don't know, naive, and I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't really get into meeting the guys and knowing about it. I didn't care about that stuff, you know. I was only 19. What did I know? I didn't even know how to order out of from a menu. I was totally, you know, out of it.
You just wanted to play, right?
I just wanted to play. Yeah. I just was so thrilled with that part of it.
So you never took any visits back to the Gretsch factory?
No, and I'm just so sorry I never took advantage of that, because I could have learned so much about it, and I never was good at that. You know, I'm so like now kids, they come up to me, hey, have you heard the new something 19 and the X40 and the size of this is a new symbol, and I never was into that, and I just respect them so much for doing that. I'm not that. I don't think that way. I just see a drum set and I like it, and I buy it, you know, and I like that symbol. I'm going to get that symbol, you know. And recently I've tried to become more aware of those numbers, but it's to me, either the drum sound. In fact, here's the story that kind of puts it all in perspective as far as I'm concerned. When Philly was out here, Philly Joe Jones with Miles Davis in 1956, I think it was 56 or 57. I think it was 57. And they were having jam sessions at a club here on Sunday afternoon, and it was with Herb Geller and Joe Maney, because Joe was playing at a strip club, and Gary Fromer was playing drums at the strip club. Lorraine Geller was playing piano.
Lorraine Geller?
Yeah, that was Herb Geller's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget who. I don't even know if they had a bass player. I forget who the bass. Anyway, so these guys were having a Sunday session at this strip club, and lo and behold, Philly Joe Jones came in and sat in. And I was living about a block from there at the Blackburn Hotel, and I had just smoked a joint. I went over there, and I just sat down, and there was some rickety old drums there, and Philly sat in and just made those drums sound like $1 million. I mean, it was junk drums, totally. I mean, just horrible. They were all mismatched. Nothing. It was just, and he made them sound so beautiful. So I said, well, it's because I'm stoned. So the next Sunday, I didn't get high, and I went back in. I'm gonna see. He did the same thing to me. He just did this. He just totally wiped me out with that same rickety old set. I said, that's it. It's not the drums. It's the guy who's playing it. That's what makes the drum sound good.
Right.
And it's been proven to me over and over. I've done things. Been at things where guys will sit in on drums, same set, and they make the drum sound different. The way they play it, it's the drummer, you know.
Yeah. Do you mind if I put all that in about you going to the strip club, or?
No, go ahead.
Okay, fine. I just didn't want to put something in the book that you might find offensive. No, it's so true, and that's really what I want to say in this book. Even though Gretsch drums were great, it's not the drums, it's the drummer.
It's the drummer. It's you know. But I take my hat off to Gretsch for seeing that, because they
capitalized on
on where it was at that period. Right. It was the jazz. I mean, let's face it, those were the greats. Those are the masters.
Mm-hmm.
The guys now are learning from those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And Gretsch was smart enough, and they utilized, like you said, they utilized that knowledge in the correct way. But listen, it was nice talking to you.
I appreciate this. Thanks so much for
Now, this is going to be a book, huh?
Yeah, it's going to be a book. It's going to be called Gretsch Drums, The Legacy of the Great Gretsch Sound. And that's, the Great Gretsch Sound was obviously the players. And even though I talk about the X400 this and the chrome-plated that, it was, what I always bring it back to is, these guys could have done it with any drum,
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a good marketing move,
Of course.
Yeah, and that's what it really was all about. But I want to talk about the great drummers because some of these guys just haven't gotten the attention that they deserve.
Yeah. Well, I talk about all these guys at school because I want to make them aware of those are the guys that made all this popular, possible that's going on now.
Yeah, we can't let it die.
No.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much.
Again, thank you.
I'm sorry I took up so much of your day.
No, not
here.
at all. My wife is mad at me, but that's okay.
They get over it, right? They're living with drummers. They got to expect that kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck. Thanks so much.
Good luck with the book.
I'll be in touch again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.